Welcome to the Far West LHD Safe Space Co-Design, and really excited to be at this stage of this process. I'm James, one of the facilitators from Rose in the Ocean, and I have Will here. Will, hello.
Good afternoon. I'm William, one of the facilitators on the project for the Far West. Really excited to see that we're at this near final stage of the project. And yeah, I think feedback loop 3 today should be a really good one.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks, Will. Let's go through our formal process if we can, please, and that being the acknowledgement of country, acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And we acknowledge the Kanji people of the lands which we meet. Also, as we always do, acknowledgement of lived experience, those who may be bereaved, those who may be going through a current suicidal crisis, or those who might be caring for someone lost to suicide. Every lived experience is unique, valuable and can make a difference. I'm going to share our slides if I can, please. And this, as I said, this is exciting in terms of where we're up to in the process. We've come so far in this process, and as Will just mentioned, we've got some amazing ideas, concepts, feedback, collegiate support from everyone. If you have a look there, we're right down feedback loop 3 today. This sense of really just about at the end in terms of this process. We'll talk about next steps at the end of this presentation, where this goes and what the survey brings us. But today's to give you guys, the audience, an opportunity to see where we're up to, some of the feedback, and certainly around some final suggestions to inform the final service model.
James, if I may, for those who have been part of the process so far, or anybody who is watching the webinar and hasn't been part of the workshops themselves through this process, I think it's important to note there's a lot of stuff listed on that page there, and you can see we're circled down towards the end of the process. A couple of things to note: what you're seeing here doesn't really illustrate the depth to which the project has actually gone, and participants themselves throughout this entire process have attended those sessions, some of them for a couple of hours at a time, and really dug deep into their own insights and experiences and been very generous with their time, their emotions and their energy about what this safe space should actually be. So it's really great to see we're at this pointy end of the process, and we're getting to finishing off the design for the safe space. But I think it's important to acknowledge just how much effort has gone into it. It is going to be exciting to see the LHD actually have a safe space come to fruition, and that is going to be the result of all the work that's been put into this by the participants themselves. So if you are watching this, you've participated in the workshop so far, bravo and thank you. If you haven't, or if you've been submitting through the survey, they also really appreciate it. All your voices are crucial to make sure the safe space is going to be a success.
Wonderful. Thanks, Will. So let's have a look at where to from here. We're going to have a quick look at the feedback loop from the lived experience respondents and, of course, the health professional response as well. So I won't read them all out, but lived experience perspectives here, some really cool quotes. It's very important to keep, or so important with consumers, consent to keep connected with carers, families, so that everyone can work together for a positive outcome. And I can see a future that volunteers could play a role, if not just providing the comforts of a home or safe space. While the paid staff are concentrating on the health area, we could be making the coffee, cooking some homemade goodies, and I would be one of those. So some really cool little quotes there in terms of from that feedback loop survey from the lived experience perspectives. Let's have a look at the health professionals and some of their comments as well. Risks include the cafe manager not having clinical experience, the site and or building not being approved in the near future, the SPOT team not having available clinical positions who are able to support the peer workers. So a couple of comments there from that survey. I know we've talked about on a number of occasions the operating hours and some concerns with that, and that always aligns to and continues to align to the Ministry of Health and the resourcing available in terms of 2 FTEs for this short term, for this initial process. That might change, of course, but at this stage, they're some of the constraints that we're working towards, as we are with all LHD safe spaces.
I think it's a good note too, though, that the feedback broadly so far has been focused on 2 of the big bugbears of every LHD that's going through this process across New South Wales, which is location and opening hours, which because of logistics, is very difficult to figure out. So do you want it on hospital grounds? There's a quote there talking about the pros of that happening because it's very close to ED in case you do need to access that. Downsides, some have illustrated, is that the connotation of being so close to the hospital might be a detriment. But for the feedback to be really based about those two main things, about the location and the hours, says volumes, I think, that the work the participants have done in this process so far is, I think, hitting a nail on the head. So those two final things really are the main ones to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. And love your feedback music too, or background music as you speak, Will. There's a little bit of groovy music.
Apologies. I think that's playing in the office.
It's all right. But I think that's really important, as you say. A lot of the internal, within the walls of what this safe space will look like, has carefully been crafted through a number of amazing conversations and ideas. So looking forward to see how that pans out. The joint co-design session, what we did was we ran through a couple of scenarios and asked participants to have a look at each scenario. We broke them off into to groups in the breakout sessions and gave them an opportunity to kind of unpack each one of these scenarios and think about what processes, what risks, what sort of next steps might need to happen in terms of each of these scenarios. So here we can see scenario one being around a teenage girl who arrived with suicidal thoughts at the safe space, first time, and yet, of course, being frightened of what she was experiencing, didn't know where else to go, and it was just on half an hour before closing time. So this is the scenario one. Let's have a look at some of the responses. This idea of getting close to the closing time, a need for a procedure for this scenario, nearing closing time, this idea of how do you connect with a manager and develop an agreed plan to walk the guest through what's happening, with the aim to connect with a guest supports person, which I think was a good idea as well. If too much flexibility, this will get out of hand. So in terms of this close time, need to protect peer workers to have a defined finish time, open and close time. Ultimately need to be able to draw a line somewhere that defines when a safe space is open and when it's closed. And I guess that I think conversation around marketing that as well. So individual guests and employees or staff understood what that was. The idea of supporting Chantel, the teenager scenario, couldn't direct her to just go to ED right away. Sorry, couldn't direct her. ED may be only service open, so could spend time with her to see if she wished to go to the ED, then advocate for her to let ED know she was coming and support her through that process. Perhaps there's another plan that could be agreed with her as well, given that she turned up half an hour before close time. The role of a safe space in determining the best/safe alternative for support, particularly natural supports, scaffolding that might be around, will depend on family, friends and supporting networks a person has outside of these formal services. And to ensure that Chantel's experience is a positive one, recognising this is the first time she's accessing support and making sure that she feels comfortable to turn up if she needs to again. The age concept, the 17-year-old, if you remember there, in terms of this scenario, not explicitly defined as age-related eligibility from the Ministry of Health guidelines. So we did have a number of conversations around what is too young in terms of what if a 14-year-old turns up or a 16-year-old, or someone 18 as this scenario was, but no definite guidelines at this stage from the Ministry of Health. Below a certain age, e.g. 16 and under, this adds complexity and uncertainty regarding safety, specifically with issues around obtaining consent and mandatory reporting process. But again, the idea of a no wrong door policy. Even if someone presents who is not best suited by the safe space, staff are still trained to link the person to appropriate safe support. Even if the safe space isn't the best place for them, staff can still support person to get them to where they need to be, link them with the person's natural supports. Acknowledgement that people of all ages are likely to arrive at a safe space. And the final one there, if under 16, staff would have a gentle discussion to say, what do you need to connect with a caregiver, but can give the person some control of how that is done. So that covered scenario one. So scenario two is obviously slightly different. David arrives at a safe space, accompanied by a lady of similar age who doesn't introduce. David appears a little agitated with the woman, but seems happy to have arrived at the safe space. He accepts a cup of tea from one of the staff, and while he's chatting quietly with them, he keeps glancing towards the woman. You discover she is David's sister and is really keen to stay with him in the safe space and is very clearly concerned about her brother. Did you want to talk around these scenarios, Will?
Yeah, so I was in the breakout group with this scenario, and I do want to applaud the participants that I was with. They jumped straight into it, and at no point were they kind of stuck with what to do, which was really comforting. And I think the safe space provides a great foundation of how to handle even emergent things like this. So one thing we identified with this particular scenario was that David, while he seemed glad to be there, there may have been some sort of discomfort with his sister being present as well. And we don't know the relationship between David and his sister. So one thing that we identified was understanding David's need was absolutely crucial and critical to the experience. So the role of the peer worker is to greet David and sensitively inquire about what brought him to the safe space and recognize that he might be able to express this straight away. We acknowledge that the presence of a sister could be positive. She might have information about David's situation, about his history. She might be a good natural support for David in this role, but it may also make things more difficult. If that relationship is strained, it may be abusive, or it may just be a very difficult relationship. Having her there could be a boon, but it could also cause some distress. And so that needs to be really carefully maintained. His well-being, David's well-being, and the confidentiality is absolutely top priority. And so his choice of sister's involvement should be really deeply considered. One, I think, great safety point was that a worker should stay consistently with David throughout the process. And if that's the case and the sister is there, then we would probably get another peer worker or volunteer to stay with the sister. If she does want to be there and David does want her to be there, make sure there is sort of a tag team, making, keeping the two supported. Communication, absolute core value, that speaks to the safe space's overarching values and principles as well. Understanding and responding to micro and macro body language is absolutely crucial. And training in bigger things such as family violence, coercive control is really a really good idea. We did talk about the importance to match David to a peer worker who understood his exact preferences. We don't know in this scenario what David's background is, what his culture, his English ability, whether he's LGBT, or not. And so that's really important that when we do work with David, we start to uncover what does he actually need. That does speak to some of the requirements that the participants have described earlier about having a really culturally diverse and equipped team at the safe space to accommodate that. The other side of that coin is David's sister herself. It is one thing with the guests themselves, just David being in that space and being supported, but his sister is also a key element of this. And so if the presence of a sister is a risk to David's safety and likely to cause distress, we need to recognize that and have a plan as to how do we actually address that. It's important to include and involve David's sister in that space, so long as that is respectful to his wishes. It should not be purely in the hands of the sister or the family member to decide that, but it should be ensured that we're understanding all aspects of this. But David's safety is always the number one priority we should be trying to achieve. The information for David's sister as a support person, I think, is really important as well, and that was highlighted by the team in the breakout room to make sure that if there's information that's appropriate and it's relevant to safety and well-being being provided to the sister, then we probably should do that rather proactively. And then document conversation with sister is important. And that does raise some questions about how we do maintain data privacy and we get consent documentation, but ensuring that we do have those notes down about what conversations were had with David's sister as well as David is really crucial. This scenario, I think, raises some really interesting questions around dynamics of family members and friends that are coming into the space with a guest. It also raises some questions around capacity. If we have one guest who brings along 5 people, for instance, that does impact how many people we can have in a room at a time, particularly during a pandemic. It also does speak to the supports outside of the safe space. If we know that David's sister is a great support person, we might want to lean onto that and ensure that we can work with his sister to support David once he leaves the safe space. But what if that's actually a greater threat to David's well-being than it is a support? And so a lot of these questions aren't going to be figured out right now, but I think this scenario really does open up a great box to look at of what happens if in these situations.
And so, yeah, thanks, Will, and certainly have an opportunity to give that feedback in the survey post this. Then we spent some time, and I think this is a really great opportunity for participants to think about what were their non-negotiables. What were they really thinking about with things that the safe space need to have from their eyes and experience. And that's some great ideas here. The sense that it's a conversational feel, not an assessment feel. And I sincerely believe that's that movement from a clinical approach to very much a supportive safe space. Peer workers have access to support if not feeling comfortable with that idea, that they also need that help. If anybody attends, they'll be supported to come in a safe space if they wish. Respectful to all people, voluntary if someone prefer to access ED, that's their choice, this sense of choice. Future focus and responsive to community needs as they change and evolve. Safe for all consumers, staff and service. Inclusive, inviting, best practice peer-led service with clinical guidance and support. Offers support after hours, genuine, empathetic and holistic, not the stock standard onward referrals. Calming, homely and comforting space. Hopeful, empowering and inspiring service. Continual training to improve the service, that same theme again there, and not established in a way that it doesn't seem like it's an alternative to ED. So some great ideas there from individuals saying this is what we need in terms of that safe space. So some areas still needing a bit of agreement and teasing out is where will the service be located within the region, still trying to determine what that might look like in terms of some opportunities. How will the service support people spread far across the various geographic regions, and some ideas maybe through phone or video access. What do the connection pathways and partnerships between the space and the SPOT team look like? And is there scope for involvement of community volunteers? And we're certainly talking a lot around what the role of volunteers would be and how they would be recognised and or trained and or remunerated as well as an idea. Involvement of community volunteers and their potential role. What is needed to develop and support suicide prevention peer workers? And how should the governance of the safe space work? Talk about policies and procedures, the idea of data collection. How do you collect? How much do you collect? When do you collect? What's imperative to collect? What's not so much? What's the experience when you do collect? Reporting, of course, and some ongoing co-design. And how does the safe space balance the no wrong door approach with issues around supporting children and young people safely? So there are some opportunities for participants or those that haven't participated to certainly pick that up in the survey. Next steps. Will, do you want to walk us through the next steps?
Sure.
I think we're still there, but
so we're in feedback loop 3, which is one of the final steps in the actual co-design process. At the moment, the survey is live and it will be through to the 26th of November, and the link is there. If you're a participant, you also receive that directly, I believe. That survey is really open to everybody within the community. And if you are a participant and you have more ideas, more suggestions, please jump in there and fill in the survey. As well as if you know anybody else within the community that would like to have a voice in this process, please send that link on. The more perspectives that we have in this process, the better that design for the safe space will actually be. There might be some challenges that we have, say with location, that we're racking our brains around trying to figure out the best result, or hours, and what's the best balance of hours and coverage of hours with the 2 FTs that we have. Someone in the community might have the answer to that question. And so bringing this survey out to everybody that's willing to provide feedback might uncover those insights. Over the following week, we'll collate all the feedback from that survey with the previously captured co-design outputs, of which there is a bunch. And shout out to Lee, who is part of this process and capturing all that in the mural digital whiteboard, and Elliot and Mitch at Beacon. There's Lee, who have been collating at after every workshop as well. It's been quite a long process to get to this point. The service model development will then happen where we actually start piecing together exactly how this service is going to operate. We then finalize the governance model, the location and staff recruitment. And that's really exciting because that means that's starting to actually coalesce into something you can see, you can visit, and you can be part of. At which point, when the safe space is starting up, there's a guardianship role that we've taken by Roses of the Ocean to support transfer of a service model and the actual service delivery. And essentially what that means is Roses will be overseeing the setup of that safe space and for a brief period once it actually opens, just to ensure that it does live up to the designs that were created during this process through lived experience and the health professionals, which I think is a really great initiative to ensure that the design really is realized. After that, about 3 to 6 months down the track, we have a redesign workshop that includes guests who have utilized the service. And I think that's one of the best elements of this whole process. And to reiterate, when we started the co-design, we started with lived experience first, and they had their say about what a safe space should be, what their experiences of ED have been, and how would that actually be improved or supplemented through a safe space. We work with health professionals as well in that process after the experience to talk about what are your experiences in working within these spaces, referring people to these spaces. What's the ideal for you as a health professional? Best thing to end this on then is 3 to 6 months after it launches, talk to those who have used it. And we know it never do you have design that's perfect. And so what about that safe space could be further improved? How do we make sure this is the best possible service for the region? So I'm really looking forward to that workshop. That's going to be absolutely brilliant. That said, that is quite some time away. James and I have been working with the participants, both lived experience and health professionals, for quite a few weeks now, and Far West has been sped up. So usually this actually takes about 12 weeks to complete. I don't know how many weeks we took to do this one, but at the request of the LHD, we did get through this faster. And I want to really acknowledge and pay my respect to those who participated in this, who, as I said earlier, gave their emotions, their energy, to ensure the safe space would happen and that they are striking while the iron is hot and really using the resources that are there. Every lived experience participant who joined the call and talked about things that are often really quite challenging, that are very personal, but wanting to use that experience to help others and to make the world a better place for anybody else who might be going through such an experience. You have my absolute adulation and respect. This process has been really something quite special for the region. And I know James and I and Lee are all really looking forward to seeing it actually live. And should we be in the area, we can't wait to go see it.
Wonderful. And you can see the thanks, you can see the list there of thank yous. But also I'd like to thank you, Will, and Lee, and certainly Bridget as well from Raising the Ocean to help.
Bridget's a lifesaver.
Yeah, absolutely. So
all your emails and contact dates and Zoom links, that's all Bridget. James, Lee and I don't have the facilities to manage that. Bridget has been brilliant. And as you see on the slides there, Christy and Chelsea from the LHD in their partnership with Roses in helping to make sure this process does go smoothly, as well as speeding it up to get something in place. Thank you, as well as Beacon Strategies and Elliot for taking all our notes and putting into something that actually works.
Which is fantastic. Thanks again. Thanks again for your time. Jump onto that survey when you get a chance. Share that survey if you get a chance, and we look forward to the next steps. Thanks again, Will.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, James. See you soon.